Hi, everyone. Welcome to Doses of. My name is Darlene Tovar, and I am a spiritual mentor and licensed professional counselor. If you are new here, welcome. This is my holistic mental wellness podcast. If you have been watching and following along, welcome back. Today's episode is going to be about me and my sacred disruption. Those of you who have been following along know that season 3 has been all about sacred disruption. We've already seen and talked to the lovely Sol Bautista. We've talked to Bri Hermosillo as well. And I wanted to hop on and give my own account of my own sacred disruption. And I feel like this one is quite interesting because the sacred disruption was also the medicine itself. And we haven't seen that yet. And so I feel like this is a really important topic to talk about. I've been wanting to talk about it for a couple of years, but it's such a taboo subject. And every time I mention wanting to talk about it or mention wanting to interview people about it, it's kind of dismissed maybe in a way because of the content of the topic that I want to talk about. And it's because of the legality of it. Um, it's legal in some places, it's illegal in others. And well, navigating that system is pretty difficult nowadays. And so um, I guess I'll just share. You guys know that I am a certified psychedelic assisted therapy facilitator and guide. Um, and I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here because the history with plant medicine as a healing medicine is it's been tarnished by white people extracting Americans, white people extracting the medicine from the Mazatec village where Maria Sabina lived, Huautla de Jimenez in Oaxaca, Mexico. And, for those of you who don't know the history, I'll scratch the surface a little bit. I believe his first name was Robert. I don't remember. I know his last name was Wasson. Ended up going, he was something for JP Morgan, and he ended up going down into Huautla de Jimenez. And he had already discovered that mushrooms had been used ritualistically and religiously across the globe. It's not just something that existed in Mexico, right? They have been used for thousands of years in other indigenous communities around the world as a healing medicine. And so he ended up going into Oaxaca to Huautla de Jimenez, and that's where he met Maria Sabina. And Maria Sabina was a curandera, a shaman in that town. And she performed and guided and facilitated journeys for the people of her town. Anyway, I don't want to get way into all of that, but I feel trapped in what I'm doing currently because I am also part of the colonizer narrative, if you will. I don't have another way of saying it, but I have the Western teachings of mental health and wellness. And I've also learned the ritualistic aspects and the more ancient teachings and wisdom teachings of the indigenous communities. And, each side sees things in such a different way because eventually what happened is that the medicine was appropriated, it was extracted, people started using it recreationally, and unfortunately, Maria Sabina died penniless with the disrespect of her town because she brought in hordes of Americans, or they sought her out in the 60s and 70s. The beatniks and the hippies went in search of the mushrooms, and instead of using it for healing purposes, they went in search of God. And so ever since then, and obviously with all of the decolonization work, with the re-indigenization of communities, I feel like I'm stuck in the middle because I have the colonizer teachings, and I'm also working through and learning still a lot about the indigenous ways of how they use this medicine. And so that's a whole like preface for what the sacred disruption in my life was. And I talk about all of the history behind it because, I want everybody to understand that this is not an easy subject to talk about. I know that there are podcasts about this, and Joe Rogan talked about this. And I don't know, there's lots of people who have had guests and talked about plant medicine. And I feel like it's my turn because I am hosting and facilitating a group in Mexico, in Oaxaca, at the end of September. And I'm not just doing this because I don't know what's behind it. I have the experience myself, and this sacred disruption was something that changed my life in such groundbreaking ways for me and how I move about just life in general. So I'll explain a little bit about myself. Those of you who have been following since seasons 1 and 2 have already heard the history of trauma that I lived through growing up. I was sexually abused. I was physically beaten. I was bullied by a parent, and there was lots of traumatic experiences. I witnessed domestic violence. I witnessed alcoholism. If you all know what the ACEs scores are, the Adverse Childhood Experience Scale, I actually check 9 out of the 10 boxes for the experiences that I had growing up. And so I have had so many traumatic experiences that caused arrested development in my life. Arrested development means that I kind of stayed at a certain developmental age for certain things in my life. So, for example, I excelled very highly in academics because of the way that I was raised. My parents made me perform and earn my love, and performing highly and achieving well at school was what earned me their attention and their praise. Otherwise, it was they were focused on their marital dysfunction. I was dumb. I wasn't doing things correctly because I didn't get things right on the first go around. They didn't treat me like a child. They expected me to understand things like an adult. Um, and then I was beaten physically and like all of those things, right? So that causes arrested development in a person. And as I was maturing, I ended up realizing in hindsight how long I had lived in the state of mind of like a 17-year-old. I was a 17-year-old in my mindset, I don't know, into my late 20s, I want to say. And so, I think about whenever I became angry, I was definitely a teenager. I've talked about that in my internal family systems episode. When I become sad, I'm like a 5-year-old, and that's how I showed up. And, I talked about that in my internal family systems episode as well. And through all of the therapy modalities that I had gone through, there was still something not connecting. There was still something not connecting, and I was still stuck in patterns of behaviors that even my parents would be like, why? I don't understand. You're this age and you have this education. At that point, I had a master's degree and I had a career as a teacher. And like, there were so many things in my life that just didn't add up. And I didn't understand, like looking backwards, I'm like, oh my God, like all of that makes perfect sense. But when I'm in the trenches in the moment, I hadn't figured out what was going on. And so through my master's program for my degree to become a therapist, I have 2 master's degrees, and the second one is for counseling. My peers started talking about psychedelics in the therapeutic spaces, and I became really intrigued by it because up until that point, the extent to which I had any sort of contact with drugs was really marijuana. Marijuana was the only thing that I had done, and it doesn't like my body. I have a whole trauma around it myself. So, I tried it when I was a teenager, didn't enjoy it. I gave it another shot again as an adult, and I just didn't like the way it made my body feel. And so that was the extent of drugs that I had tried. And I have my parents to thank for that, because they instilled such a deep fear in me about what drugs were that I didn't even want to bother experimenting with anything else that existed out there, right? And my drug of choice was alcohol. That was what I used to escape and what I used to numb when I was going through the different challenges that came up in my life. And so um yeah, I mean that clearly that has changed slightly now that I'm a facilitator of psychedelic assisted therapy, but um I guess we can get into the whole sacred disruption thing. My sacred disruption and modality, part of the modalities that I turned to therapeutically, was plant medicine. And I started because of the discussions that I had with my peers. They were talking about microdosing, and that was starting, I believe, in like 2019 is when I started hearing about it. I don't know when it actually started happening. There are protocols that people follow now for microdosing with different kinds of substances. And at that point, I had just heard about psilocybin microdosing, and I decided to try it for myself. Now, I'll leave a little disclaimer here. I don't ever recommend that anybody, to any degree, do recreational drugs, because I don't condone any of that, but especially with this plant medicine. I don't recommend that anybody do them therapeutically on their own. I did it because I thought that in my wisdom of having graduated with a degree in mental health counseling, that I would be able to navigate that stuff on my own. And I wasn't entirely wrong, but I know that if I had had a guide or a shaman or somebody who knew what they were doing to help me integrate my journeys, that maybe things would have gone a different way, or I would have been able to decipher what my journeys and what my experiences were and meant, and what they were calling me to action to do in a different way, versus me just trying to interpret them on my own, right? We need an objective third party. That's what therapy is. That's essentially what a facilitator and a guide does for you when they include the integration services. Now, it's important. I've mentioned several times in other videos that I've posted that you find someone that does hold the integrity of helping you through the integration process of a journey. Otherwise, they're kind of just stiffing you. There's so much more than just the journey of plant medicine. There's so much preparation that needs to happen beforehand. There's so much integration that needs to happen afterwards. And if you don't find somebody that provides those services, then that's probably not the right person. Anyway, getting back to my experience, I chose to do it by myself. And what I thought was microdosing was essentially taking little pieces of the substance and going into my own journeys. And I had these deep revelations, deep realizations, to the point where the first thing that it helped me to do was to extract me from a very toxic, on and off, almost 9-year romantic relationship. I know for a fact that because of my arrested development, if I had not used plant medicine, I would have stayed in that relationship. I was taught that love was meant to hurt. I was taught that everybody who loves you hurts you. I was taught that you needed to earn love. And this relationship had all of those elements. And when I started doing my plant medicine, I kind of like woke up to a realization that I wanted more out of a romantic relationship, that I had been so long with this person that I wanted to procreate. And, I came back with that knowledge and realization to that person, and things changed drastically in the relationship. And within 3 months after I started my microdosing, I walked away and I never looked back. And it didn't feel heavy on my heart like it had been the other times that we had been on and off. So that was one of the things that plant medicine has helped me with. Another one of the things that it's helped me with is to deal with my anxiety. I've always been a very anxious person, and I've used dissociation to deal with discomfort. I hadn't been able to be present. I hadn't been able to like enjoy my life and understand what's happening around my life for years on end. I think I've talked about having been on autopilot for a very long time before this, but I, my anxiety symptoms are more easy to identify before they go into full blown anxiety or full blown panic attacks, which I had maybe two or three in the past. And I think the only thing that I'm still working through is my dissociation. Dissociation has been the one thing that has like put me in survival mode because of all of the things that I experienced growing up. I shared in one of my 30-second dance party video explanations, if you follow me on my Instagram account, that the reason why I dance so much is because it puts me back in my body, whereas dissociation gets me out of my body, it keeps me in my brain, or it puts me externally outside of my body and distracts me with something else so that I don't feel the discomfort of triggering experiences that happen to me. And under guided journeys, I've been able to recall memories from my childhood of very traumatic things that I witnessed, the domestic violence that I witnessed, other memories that I had. Um, it helped me to go further back to remember things that I had repressed about certain memories and clear up quite a few things for me about my childhood. I was able to process through my sexual abuse and extend forgiveness to the three people who put me through that. The myriad things that plant medicine has helped me through is just insane on the other side of this. And, it's the helping me to reclaim my voice part. It's the confidence that I carry now. So different. I've said this in past episodes. If you all met me a few years ago, I'm going to say 5 years ago, I'm a completely different I mean, obviously, if you've known me since way before that, hopefully you've seen some of the changes that have occurred. But through that, I've had to grow through that arrested development. So I'm no longer that like 17, 18-year-old mindset in the body of a grown woman anymore. I think that's like the most cringe and embarrassing part to admit about how I used to live my life before, because it explains me turning to alcohol. It explains me um, accepting less than I deserved and settling for less than I deserved in my romantic relationship, and um, how I navigated through life because of other things that I wasn't taught. I kind of just shrunk myself down to not want to be seen. And that's one of the other ways in which it's helped to reclaim my voice, is because I was so afraid of failure. I was afraid of being seen like publicly. I was afraid of looking stupid. I was afraid of people knowing my story and judging me, of being like this idiot woman who had wasted her life on this, in relationships and career. And I I was really down on myself, and even with authority figures. I mean, it was so anxiety inducing for me to have to talk to bosses of mine because I felt like this child that was getting scolded or that was going to be scolded or that was, the triggers of my childhood, that every single time I talked to an adult, it was because I was getting yelled at for inconveniencing them for some reason. And that's how I lived my life. And I have slowly but surely climbed my way out of that thanks to this medicine. It's making me feel really sentimental because I don't recognize myself anymore. And I feel so grateful for that. I have put out a lot of vulnerable things online, and it's filled with courage, not with fear anymore. Starting these dance parties was definitely not a thing that I would have ever thought that I would do in public, to just go and dance by myself and invite strangers to have 30-second dance parties with me and to learn the positive effects that dance has on your mental health. Like, that's how I'm reclaiming my voice. I'm being the highest, most ideal version of myself. I am now mentally definitely more mature than I was then, even 5 years ago, I'm going to admit. And it's thanks to these guided plant medicine journeys that I've had. The other questions that I've asked the guests that have come onto the show for season 3 is, how did this experience help you root into your ancestral power? Well, this medicine has allowed me to talk to my ancestors and to get guidance, receive guidance from them through the journeys, and then outside of it as well, outside of the journeys as well. I now can just talk to my ancestors and communicate with them. And I feel so much more connected to my lineage and my ancestry and my culture and just the people I come from than I ever have before. I think I've shared in the past that since I started my healing journey, I've become more and more of who Darling was meant to be. And I think that plant medicine just skyrocketed that to be 100% who Darling was meant to be, without the social conditioning, without the conditioning of her parents and the fears that they instilled in me and the paths that they wanted me to take, and like who I was actually meant to be and what I'm actually meant to do to serve and fulfill my mission on this planet as a being in this vessel. The plant medicine has helped me to unlock that. And I think one of the very important things that I want to highlight about plant medicine is that it's not something that you need forever. You don't need to rely on it forever. It's something I've discovered. I don't know quite yet what the indigenous belief behind it is. It's what I've discovered for myself, that the medicine shows you what you're capable of while you're under it. And then your job in the integration process is to go and find those capabilities without the medicine, because it just shows you, like, this is what you can do. This is what you're capable of. Now go. And so I think I want to make that clear, that it's not something that people need to do forever. To, you heal what you need to heal, and then you go about your life the way that you need to live your life in order to live it to its fullest. What did my process of integration or alchemization look like? So, as a facilitator myself, and as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, the integration process, along with the preparation process, are probably one of the most important things outside of having the actual medicine experience itself. The integration process for me has looked like dancing, a lot of dancing to help work through and process the visualizations, the messages, and the insights that I've gained from my medicine journeys. Another thing, I've never considered myself a creative person, but I don't know why not. I used to play the accordion. I played it for like 5 years growing up, and I played the violin from elementary to middle school. And I'm pretty good at picking up instruments if I like hyper focus on doing that. I haven't done that this time around in my adulthood just yet. I feel like it's something that I want to do, but I haven't had the time to do it because I know that you need a lot of like time to focus, and I've been so focused on, making my private practice flourish or helping my private practice flourish that I haven't had the time to do that. But art art has definitely been something that I've used in my integration process, and that has looked like painting, it has looked like drawing, it has looked like going to museums, it has looked like learning embroidery. I picked up a couple of projects, one of which, the first one was a pattern that I decided to follow. I know nothing about embroidery. I did this. It's whatever. I'm going to put it in a frame and maybe gift it or something. And then I went rogue. I really like flowers. And this is probably my favorite piece that I've done because I kind of just like didn't think about it. I know the kinds of flowers I wanted on it. And then I took inspiration from a pattern that I saw at the store. And I was like, I think I can do something like that on my own. So I drew it out and then I embroidered it. And this is the result. So, what the integration process for me has looked like is very artsy. I actually did and completed The Artist's Way, a book that helps you get into more of your creativity. And so that's, on the other side of having done these plant medicine journeys, I've been able to get to know myself a lot better. I've been able to develop these talents, these creative talents that I had always second guessed myself whether they existed or not. Um, and so, yeah, the integration and alchemizing process has been quite interesting, alongside having my own therapist who is also an expert in helping to integrate medicine journeys and make meaning of what I see and what I experienced in them. So, um, it's been quite the process. Some of the journeys that I've had years ago are still unfolding today. And I'm gathering meanings now, and things are happening now that I'm like, oh, that's that's what that journey meant by showing me or telling me or guiding me to X, Y, and Z things. So it's been quite groundbreaking in that way. And yeah, I'm probably going to say several times throughout this how grateful I am to the medicine for that. Oh, the next question. What are you most grateful for about this sacred disruption? Man, the sovereignty that I've gained. I feel like I've been breaking so many cycles in my lineage that for generations people didn't break, like, you know, staying in long term relationships because of what people might think, or because it's frowned upon by the church, or because marriage is for life. Um, and that's on both sides, right? That's both male and female. That I know that for generations, people stayed out of obligation. People stayed out of what will people think. That I have my own business. I'm not the only one in my lineage who has, but I know that, especially with my parents, it was just taught to stay in the system and like work for people and earn money that way. And I didn't. I have my own business and I'm wanting to scale it and wanting to grow it, and it's going to happen. I've traveled the world, and several people in my lineage were content with staying in the one place where they were born and where they grew up and where they lived, and that was that. And I'm not that human. I feel like I want to explore every tiny corner of this world and learn as much as I can from all of the cultures that I encounter, um, appropriately, and honoring the people who teach me whatever it is that they want to teach me. Never want to appropriate. I never want to extract. I just want to honor and share my love and bring peace and, for lack of better terms, I want to help bring heaven to earth for myself and for others. And I think that this medicine has kind of helped me to get to a certain point in that way. I feel like while I was going through that healing process with the medicine, I was very inward and isolated and withdrawn to kind of work through a lot of the things that I needed to work through. But on the other side of it, I'm definitely more community oriented, and I'm really grateful for that. I feel like I'm something very different in my lineage, and I'm proud. I'm proud to say that I can learn all of these things. In the last episode with Bree, I began to start talking about different gifts that I'm developing on the more spiritual side. I'm utilizing tarot and mixing it with my therapy services, and I get downloads from ancestors, and this is all medicine free. This is all because I was able to do it on the medicine, and now I'm exploring those things and how I can utilize those to help people if and when they seek those services with me. I feel like I'm in this position of bridging the gap between the two worlds, because there are a lot of us who have a positive intention and want to use this medicine to actually help people heal, and it's not to keep people in ego and to look for God, and to there's definitely research studies that have shown how helpful plant medicine has been to get rid of and eliminate almost anxiety symptoms and deep depression, and help with a substance use and addiction, and work through trauma and PTSD. And there's more research studies that keep coming out. And I don't want to dismiss that. I feel like I want to keep one foot in one world, another foot in the spiritual ancestral wisdoms, because they both can work together. We can't have one without the other. And so, yeah, those have been, I think, the main things that I've wanted to share about my sacred disruption and how it's changed my life to get rid of and help me through arrested development, trauma, and just navigating this life as a different person, sovereign and free from, just liberated from conditioning and what societal expectations are, and yeah, it has a lot to offer. And at the end of the interviews, I always ask people what it is that they have that's coming up, and where we can find whatever it is that they're doing. And so I will share that I have an opening conference role that is coming up for me for Congreso for the Latinos in Heritage Conservation, that's coming up here in mid-August. I'm really excited. I get to travel to Chicago for that and set the tone for the whole conference. I'm elated and so honored to have been chosen to do that. I have a few other talks and workshops that I'm going to be guiding here in the state of Texas. And the biggest thing that I have coming up is actually a facilitated journey for a group of people in Oaxaca, Mexico. So if you're interested, or if you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I have my Instagram and my website. You can contact me at Illumina, which is my business, or you can send me direct message on Instagram. and ask me any questions that you might have, any curiosities you might have about this. There's so many other things that this medicine has done for me, and I just feel like for the sake of time, and I don't want to be redundant, and I don't know, I just feel like there's I would like to leave it open for any curiosities that anybody has about this, because it's it's an interesting topic, subject. It is scary because of what it is and the experiences that people may have had recreationally, but when it's done appropriately and when you've gone through the proper channels of assessing whether this is the right medicine for you or not, then it becomes a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more clarity that comes with that, instead of just going and like doing this on your own without any guidance, without any explanation, without any integration, without any sort of knowledge about what people are getting into, then it can be really difficult. So please reach out. I'm an open book, clearly, sharing so many things on here. But yeah, any questions that you all have. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to leave you all with all of my light, all of my love, and many, many blessings. I will see you all on the next episode of Doses Up.